So this is primarily a retro gaming channel, but I do play modern games from time to time, and there are times when playing a modern game that I go, boy do I have some thoughts about this one. Well, a new Contra game called Contra Operation Galuga was released just recently, and as a child of the NES Contra, I absolutely had to play it, especially after seeing footage of how faithful it looked to the original game. It was developed by WayForward, a studio known for the Shantae games, as well as Contra 4, which was one of the better Contra games. So far so good. I got my copy for the Switch, which can be a bit risky for a multi-platform release, as the hardware is dreadfully underpowered compared to every other platform this game was released on. But it doesn't look too technically demanding. I mean, we knew a complex game like Mortal Kombat 1 was going to be a disaster on Switch, but here we have simple 3D rendered characters moving on a 2D plane. Probably not an issue, right? Well, upon booting it up and hopping into the first level, the first thing I noticed is that the frame rate is kind of shit. Well, not shit, but there's no way it's higher than 30 frames per second, which, let's be clear, isn't an unacceptable frame rate for most games, but this is Contra, a 2D run-and-gun game where you need every possible advantage to track projectiles and follow all the noise that's going on the screen. And I gotta say, 30 frames per second does not cut it here. It just feels wrong, like you're playing a video of a video game or something. Or like how a video game probably looks when you're old and have trouble telling what the hell is going on all the time. I don't know. Like, check this out. Did you even see the projectile that hit me there? And I do feel the frame rate is far worse in some levels, like any level where you're on a bike. And when super spread and homing missiles are filling the screen, it's like we're back to N64 frame rates again. I didn't even try the 4-player mode either, so God knows how much of a dog's breakfast that would be. What makes this extra disappointing is that the video that sold me on this game was a silky smooth 60 frames per second. And it's likely this game was developed, tested, and intended to be 60 frames per second. So no doubt what we're seeing is some down-filtered chop off a few limbs to make it fit version. And this, quite frankly, is downright unacceptable. You have to make this game 60 frames per second. I'm sorry. But the quality, playability, value, and fun factor diminish considerably because of this. And with Contra, gameplay is key. Graphics are not. The fact that the graphics compromise the gameplay so heavily means a far different approach should have been taken with the Switch version. What kind of approach? Honestly, take a machete to the graphics for all I care. Chop polygons, redo backgrounds, or take a page from the developers of the fantastic Ori and the Will-o'-the-Wisps, who used every trick in the book to ensure their game ran at 60 frames per second. And that game's graphics were a huge selling point. What's your excuse here, WayForward? Do we have to see all the striations of Bill Reiser's triceps? Because here's another thing. The gameplay here is good. Like, despite the poo-poo frame rate, I did have fun. The weapons are badass, the levels are decently designed, the bosses are big and gnarly, and that signature Contra excess is on full display. Like, look at this train turned into a giant bug. How awesome is that? The new additions like the double jump and weapon overloads are welcome, and I'm glad they didn't muck with the formula too much. You still get classic throwbacks like this grizzly green guy at the top of the waterfall, and the Babaloo Destructoid mechanism. Oh, and here's the final boss. Yeah, he does kind of look like he was ripped right out of the 1997 Spawn film, but woohoo! Awesome set piece nonetheless. But god damn, that frame rate brings the score way down. Aside from that main gripe, I do have a few more criticisms that mainly have to do with the story mode. Now, if you're like me, you probably uttered a bit of a uh-oh when you saw that there was a story mode. Well, you were right to do so because the story is bland, oh my god, bland. There was a meteor shower on the island of Galuga, which was being occupied by the Red Falcon forces. And the meteors included alien life, and there's this MacGuffin here. And this bad guy who chews the scenery every time he opens his mouth. And the dialogue scenes are in all honesty on par with your run-of-the-mill mid-range mobile phone game. Like, give us some facial variations or something. The worst is when they happen not at the beginning or end of the stage, but in the middle of the stage. And they just go on forever, like, let's go! So, word of advice, play story mode to unlock what you need to unlock, and then stick to arcade mode from there on out. And finally, the music underwhelmed, at least for me. When I think of Contra music, I think headbang and old school heavy metal, something that stylistically matches blasting away at a massive Terminator skull. Here they kind of did a symphonic interpretation with a friggin' brass section. I mean, if this were a G.I. Joe game, sure, maybe this would be okay, but this is Contra, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hoping for squealing guitars and double kick drums. What else? Oh, this game is $40 USD, which is far too much. My suggestion, axe story mode, save the man hours spent animating those underwhelming cutscenes at the end, save the money spent on rent a voice actors, and sell this thing for 20 bucks. 40 bucks is just bananas for an 8-level Contra game. So I guess I'll give this game a score since that's kind of my shtick, and well, Contra Operation Galuga for the Switch gets a Motron Games record low of 5 out of 10. Swing and a miss.